it would be great. We would like to let you know that there's going to be a recording of the sessions and that you're going to write in your own language in the chat because we have interpretation of the messages. One more minute. We're gonna start. And let me have this slide on so that you can read it. Can you see my screen? If you can confirm, please. Please, because when I share, I cannot see.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I-
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. So for the ones that are connecting, please choose your language. In the language that you're going to be listening, the session is going to be Spanish. Please choose. In the chat, you can write in your own language or also, and please turn off your microphone when you are not speaking. Well, Ana Pastor, co-facilitator of this session, is gonna start with the welcome and the framework. Well, welcome everyone, to all of you, to this second session of our co-learning space about social production of habitat. We had almost 80 people that participated in our first session, where we addressed on that session was the conceptualization and contextualization of social production of habitat. This time, in this opportunity, we are going to address on a different way as the previous time, because we're going to have a round table. The goal that we have in this second session is to be able to share and learn from the experiences, concrete experiences of social production of habitat in different regions, countries of our global south, to be able to identify first what are the qualities that characterize the processes of social production of habitat. On the second place, what are the challenges that we have to be able to guarantee the control of the population over the processes that are collective processes of social production of habitat? And third place, what are the advantages that the social production of habitat shows facing the household production, and what does the market offer? What is the market offering for the production of the habitat? So social production of the habitat. For that, we have requested people from different countries from our global south, from Latin America, Africa, and Middle East and North of Africa, that are gonna start this round table. For that, we have requested on one side to Evanisa Rodriguez, that is from Brazil, a master in architecture and urbanism, and militant from União Nacional Moradia Popular. that is going to share reflections and experiences from Brazil. We are going to also ask Ana Gonzalez, also from Latin America, architect, director, and executive of the Centro Operacional de y Poblamiento, COPEVI, that is going to share her reflections and experiences from Mexico. On the other side, we have a speaker that is Monica Fawaz from Beirut, professor of urban studies and planification of the American University of Beirut and co-founder of Urban Laboratory of Beirut, that is going to share her experiences and reflections. Also, we have another speaker that we requested to share his own reflections, is Francis Reffo, professional of social justice and development and head of the Dialogue Center of Human Settlements and Relief of Poverty. We also have Rosa Molokoane from Africa, that is a national coordinator of the South African Federation of Urban Poor and member of the Management Committee of Slum Dwellers International, SDI, who's going to also share her reflections and experiences. So, to be able to start, we are going to have 3 rounds. Each one of the rounds, the speakers are gonna answer to one question that is based previously. It was sent previously, and those questions also were placed on the classroom, and many of you have answered it. What we're going to ask you then is that after each of the blocks where the 5 speakers are gonna give their own insights, briefly, 2 or 3 people that have shared can share on Classroom and can tell us in 1 minute, just 1 minute, what is the answer to these questions from their spaces. We are going to open this way. This is a way to be able to share the greatest amount of in the greatest amount of in the best of the experiences. So now I would like to give the floor to our peer, Virginia Pastor, so that she can moderate the first round. Thank you, Ana, for this great introduction. We are going to start then with the first question. Let's remember that you have 5 minutes to answer. And the first question says, what are the qualities or attributes that characterize the processes of the social production of habitat? Can you share an example that shows these qualities, please? Or features? So we're going to start with Evanisa Rodriguez from Brazil. You have now the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone that is here in this space of co-learning. This is gonna be amazing. It's a pleasure to be here in a very strong day. We have a heat wave in Brazil today, and we have we can see the climate change that shows the urgency of taking urgent measures. But well, I would like to speak a little bit of where I'm speaking of the corporate university that is a movement of habitat and household, and we are since 1980 to look for a drive for public policies that recognize the right for the social production of habitat. That means that people can have access to programs with resources, with budgets, with everything to be able to start from the organization so that we can have the proposals and we can have the way of producing the habitat and not the other way around as it happens in the general public policies in those countries, from the government that designs the policy, the program, and the people not even understand, right? Or are just as like people that see this. So this way of organization first start by mobilizing people, getting people so that they understand the habitat on the city, the housing, and it's the fight for the land. The fight for the land is very important, and is a fight to get a space for, let's say, taking the land or organizations of public land or compliance with the social production of habitat and whatever it is able to get with the land. And we fight for the budget, public budget for the production. For that, it's fundamental, this way of producing, right? It's fundamental to have the consortium with peers of technical assistants, architects, engineers, lawyers, social workers, so that they all contribute to give this service together with the compliance and with the movements to present proposals to the government. With that we can start with the land, then the project, then the license, that are the approvals and in the government and all of the things that are considered. And the ones that we pass throughout all of this process, this long process, then we can access to public resources. I'm speaking about programs that we had that were different. We had different programs with different bodies, right, for since 1980, 1990, and with different habitat programs with the national budget of the national government since 2003. We were also able to have we had a great disruptions since 2006 to 2022, but now we're working with the policies since the government has come back. To be able to see all of this and to have all of this information together with the governments, there's a process that is very important of organization of the people, that the people are used to receiving the proposal that are ready without being able to participate or say something. And we pass from that passive situation to be able to have an organization of management of reproduction, how this group of people has the right and are trained, organized, and have the tasks of this process that is very complex in different ways to be able to act and produce habitat, right? So it's a place of work and organization of quality of the work, the building quality of the materials, the financial part, the hiring of the services, the accounting, right? And we have also the time that is very important, that is the training or creation of the group as a community. We have spaces for decision making that is collective spaces, so that it is decided how is it going to be done, how is the public money going to be managed, how is going to be decided in which moment, what do we do from the experiences of a work, a comprehensive work, and also with a smaller groups how this is done also. And I'm going to end this to be able to tell you that this space is constantly improving constantly, because we're working with people that is giving their features, their competencies, their talents, their skills for the production of the habitat, that it is a process, that it is a greater and collective. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Evanisa, for the great insights from Brazil. Thank you, and we can continue with Ana Gonzalez from Mexico. Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. I would like also to say where from where I'm collaborating in social production and habitat and housing. I can collaborate in the COPEVIS organization that is turning 58 old in Mexico City and supporting organizations in other places near to Mexico or rural places. In that sense, I think it's important to highlight the processes that the population has with different alliances with civil society in this case to be able to get to close some actions, some objectives that are planned. So I think that is important because I think the social production of habitat in our countries is done continuously in our country, right? They're producing their habitat, and in some cases, they're done organized on an organized way, and in other occasions, they organize with their families, with their villages, or with social societies that are broader. And this has given place so that the laws recognize it, at least in Mexico, since 2006, where the housing law has the possibility. I don't know if you're hearing me. Can you hear me because of the internet? Yes, yes, we can hear you. Super. Okay. So now this allows it, and the state obviously has forgotten to give resources for the social production of habitat. That's an important element of the country, and I would like, if I speak, I can see and I can play some images. I'm gonna try. I don't know if that's possible, and I'll continue speaking. It is possible that the images are placed. Areli, can she share? I hope she has the permission. Anna, do you have the permission? If it's not possible, then I hope that we can do this. You can continue speaking so that we can keep the time, and we will review if you can share some images. Anna? Maybe. We lost her. I cannot see her even. Now, can you see her? Well, we can do something. We can continue with Francis Rifel, and when Anna gets back, we can continue with her. Perfect. Well, go ahead, Francis.
Okay, can you hear me?
Me puede.
All right. Good afternoon or good evening. I want to thank Habitat International Coalition for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences in this meeting. So in terms of the subject matter, which is around social production and looking at equalities in social production, I wish to really give two broad categories of my understanding of social production. Firstly, there is a self-help initiatives and efforts by individuals or community-driven social groups. And so within that first category, looking at Freetown, for example, just after the war, we had like over 500,000 housing deficits. And so poor residents had to face this reality of addressing this shortfall. So in discussing this kind of topic, I really intended to recognize, how the settlements all that by themselves are doing self-driven efforts to actually produce or build their habitats. So one of the qualities in that aspect of this first broad quality is there is always an incremental development of housing and infrastructure using indigenous techniques and skills. Freetown, where I am, before the war, we had about 20 informal settlements, mostly in the seafront areas. But now we have over 65 localities, informal settlements, sprawled across both the seafront and the hillside, as Freetown is. It's between the sea and the hills. So I'll give you an example of a community through self-help projects, which is called Krube. In 2003, Krube had 6.3 hectares. Well, it was 6.3 hectares in terms of built areas, built habitat, with 1,391 structures. But now, as we speak, 2023, it has spread up to 12.3 hectares and has up to 4,236 built structures. And this is actually through community self-help, informal way, but and they use their own indigenous technology to actually expand on the localities using waste materials. And so another quality is around social cohesion. With social production of habitat, there has to be social cohesion, because with that, communities can galvanize themselves, and then do their construction work and the like. And also they undertake local knowledge-driven advocacy. Over time, communities have been able to really influence certain practices using some local knowledge in terms of advocacy to ensure that once they have built their communities, the issues around forced eviction is not enforced. The second broad category is donor-driven initiatives. And the qualities around that actually also involve community empowerment and capacity building, participatory planning and designing, and there's incremental development of housing and infrastructure, data-driven advocacy and policy engagement, and social cohesion. But I'll just focus on one example, which is around mobilizing capacity strengthening of slum dwellers. The most critical initiative that has profoundly influenced social production of habitat in Freetown is the establishment of a network of women-dominated savings groups that are constituted as Federation of Urban and Rural Poor within and across settlements. As a community-driven and community-led social movement, we support from its professional counterpart, which is Center of Dialogue on Human Settlement and Poverty Alleviation, Kudusapa, which I'm the director. So FedUp has become attractive to community-led, is an attractive community-led social movement that is collaborating and driving service provision and delivery. And so through that, they have been able actually to collaborate with various partners and driving a lot of projects that has led to a lot of social production in their habitats. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Francis.
Thank you so much, Francis, for the summary. Let's get back with Ana Gonzalez, that we have her here. We know that she had a technical problem, but let's get back to her. Well, thank you so much. Just to get back to the examples that I think it's most important thing right now. I can speak from the social production in the rural area, that it's based in a job that we're doing in investigation, a study where there are 10 cases in Mexico that are systematizing to be able to support, to identify key elements to be able to have public incidents in a program of research that has been promoted by the state. In the case that is concrete that I am going to share, it is the organization, indigenous organizations that are United Communities for the Defense of Corn and Culture from COPEVI. We have been with them for 15 years at the beginning, creating the agenda of the indigenous organization, that is creating the diagnosis, the challenges, and the context facing the situation, and from there to establish together with them, with their committee and with their baseline, to have a working agenda where they can identify housing as an important element. In that sense, they from this exercise of planning, locate the work, and we develop incidents in the public programs of subsidy for housing to be able to build with local material. That means with the land or the wood or the stone of the place, and making an instrument that we create, because at that moment was important to work with saving, credit, and subsidy, the model that we already have, and the people that are from those places did not have and did not want to get a credit. So we made a social finance figure where the saving and the work was very important. From there, in 16 communities that we were able to do it. In one, they asked for the support to be able to work for the community equipment. They know how to do it because they have already done it. The authorities have done the paths, the schools, and everything. And in this sense, was just to collaborate, and instead of doing it in so many years, to do it more concretely and in less time. So we were able to work for a space of that we work the house of the student, and it happened in 10 years of support, when now we are placing the stones, but it starts from the soil, the production, the faenas that are very important. And now it is conveyed from the generations to the children, and that is with the rural case. And maybe if going further, we can speak about the urban cases. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna. And thank you for giving us our concrete examples that are very interesting. So now we can continue with Rose Molakain from South Africa.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Sí.
Can you hear me?
Sí.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm
Yes.
Rose. Okay. I'm Rose Molokwane from South Africa. I'm the national coordinator and the co-founder of the Federation of the Urban and Rural Poor in South Africa. And I feel very much honored to be invited into this session so that I can be able to share with you the experience of what we are doing and what I think when we talk about of habitat, we firstly look at what government is doing and what people are benefiting from what government is doing. As the Federation of the Urban and Rural Poor, we have been working with our government for almost years. Most importantly, we were engaging with the National Department of Human Settlement. So what I'm trying to raise here is that we want to see the housing that is driven through people's process. We want to look at people-centered approach of social production for habitat. And then what we have been doing for all these years, we realize that we can't just do it alone, but we can do it when we are together and organized. I think it's important that our communities has to be continuously organizing so that at the end of the day, our government should start to listen and acknowledge what the people are doing. Hence, with the Federation of the Urban and Rural Poor, we agreed that let's empower ourselves as women and use savings as a tool to mobilize each other in order for us to be able to talk with one word. Yes, we were aware that we need houses, but we can't have houses if we are not mobilized. Hence, we said, let's start by making sure that we understand each other and we come up with an agenda that will address our needs. Because when we talk about habitat for people, we are not only talking about housing, but we are talking about all the aspects that surrounds a house, like security of tenure, resources, to get resources that will help us to build the houses, the policies that are bottom up, so that our people can know and understand what our government is planning for them. So the main important thing on our side is to start to know how to influence our government's policy. And we can't just influence it when we are sitting far from our government. The issue of advocacy is important, but we can't always advocate government if we don't have information that will help us to make this government understand. We can't allow our government to decide for us without us. So the only thing that will make our government to know and understand is creating initiatives on the ground, like data collection, to collect information about ourselves, fighting for land, making sure that those people that don't have security of tenure, we make sure that our government understand that people has to have security of tenure in order for them to be able to change their lives. Now, in South Africa, our government is always saying, because of apartheid, now we have to build houses for our people. We have to do this for our people. But now we realized as the Federation that this is the creation of dependency. Yes, we agree that we have been stricken by apartheid in South Africa, but we can't always say people should depend on government, because government can't reach out to everyone and deliver everything to our people. We are having a problem of land. People are backyarders. We've got the people of informal settlements that are dilapidated. We've got a problem of people who have got land but don't have houses. So what are we doing? As the Federation, we say we want to continue to create partnership with this government so that we can be able to influence them to change the way they are doing things. I think it is important that people recognize that when the communities are standing up, they are standing up because they have seen the need of the people, what the people want, and how they can be supported to get what they want. We should not treat people or communities like beneficiaries, as our government is always calling us. We have to create a partnership that is driven by the people themselves. We have to create the partnership that will show our government that we are doing something on the ground. The only thing that we need is the support from our government. I think the policies that are being drafted by our government are not people-friendly, and it's our role as organized communities to influence those policies so that they can become the policies that are relevant to the people. So it is true that we really have to change the way we do things as the people and to change the way our government is doing things. I will continue to respond in further questions. Thank you very much for now.
Gracias, Rose, por esta intervención y esta imagen desde...
Thank you, Rose, for this intervention and the picture that you have given us of South Africa. Now we will be hearing from Lebanon. Manafawa.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me and including me here. I speak from a slightly different position than colleagues in the room because I am a faculty member, a researcher based in a university and not with a civic association. So my position is a little bit different and so will be my narration. However, I can say, speaking from Beirut, that for at least 30 years, there has not been any form of social production of housing in the form of self-help settlements or other kinds of neighborhoods that we used to see in Beirut during the civil war and before it. Instead, most low-income city dwellers today are either living in settlements that pre-existed the last 3 decades, but also without ever having seen in the country any regularization strategy, any titling, any upgrading strategies. So the settlements that exist continue to exist with the protection of political parties who sort of stand behind them, and they exist in temporary conditions, always with the threat that one day perhaps they will be evicted. Now, where do all the low-income city dwellers, still more rural migrants, and also a very large number of refugees access housing? Well, what has happened is that the existing informal settlements have basically turned into informal rental markets. And that informality has extended way beyond the existing neighborhoods. It now is in middle-income, dilapidated buildings that existed all over Beirut. And we see it in almost every neighborhood where buildings that once were middle-class buildings have now been rearranged as ad hoc apartments turned into individual rooms that basically serve as temporary shelter. All the access happens through rent, which is very important because it's not free. And residents who live in these areas are quite confined in their ability to upgrade, improve services. And this is in strong contrast with the scarcity of services in Beirut for the last 3-4 years, especially, where public electricity is no longer provided, water is also bought directly. So people who live in these circumstances are really having to devise a lot of creative means without much support or help. Their housing conditions are very precarious. First, many people, particularly refugees, live with the constant threat of eviction. Surveys we've conducted in the Beirut Urban Lab show that at least 1 in 4 households feels that threat of eviction in these types of apartments, particularly inside the city. It's really a pernicious precarity because sometimes people have lived in that room for 20 years. And still, when you ask the question of how long do you think you can stay in that room, you hear 1 month. And it's like, wow, but that's the kind of experiences we've been collecting. The spatial conditions are really dilapidated. Residents are constrained in their ability to conduct self-help. There are some examples of solidarities with existing population where we find that residents, particularly not in Beirut, but outside the city, manage to secure better conditions. And typically the reasons why and how these dwellers secure better conditions are connected to the profile of the landlords and the refugees' own entrepreneurial ability to secure funds as they reach out to an array of humanitarian agencies that exist and sort of are ready to be interpolated. So what do we do as a research lab in this situation? Well, sadly, as a research lab, the main thing we can do is research, document, make it visible, show the kind of reasons or structural reasons that produce these inequalities, and I'll speak about them perhaps more in the second round. But one of the things we've done is we've set up for Beirut a platform that we call Precarious Housing, which documents specific cases of buildings or urban clusters that basically that basically traces the story of that cluster or that building and explains the reasons that generates the precariousness and the temporality and that prevent residents from being able to upgrade their homes. Another thing we've done is try to link these kinds of this research and others with public decision makers. Now, in a context where really like public commitment to the right of housing is almost inexistent, our work is science fiction in some level, but we still try to do that and to link it to humanitarian agencies with an intent to encourage them to work beyond the immediate relief towards enlarging the channels of affordable housing in this city. But that's really stands in contrast with other cities where you still see opportunities for people to actually take over land and build housing. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Mona. Y ahora, si alguna persona
Thank you so much, Mona. And if there's one person that has participated in Google Classroom wants to make a short contribution and answer this question, you may do so right now.
Si alguien se anima.
If anybody would like to answer this question of those that have participated in the Google Classroom, the question is, what qualities characterize social production of habitat processes? If nobody wants to take the floor right now, we will be starting our second round, and then we can come back again and open for other participants to take the floor. Well, thank you so much, Virginia. In this sixth round, I hope that some of the different participants will dare to take the floor to answer this question, because they have already answered it during the Google class, but I would like them to take the floor. In this second round, we will be seeing what are the challenges in order to guarantee the control of the population of social production of habitat. For that purpose, we will be hearing our five participants, and please prepare, all of you, the rest. Which are the challenges to guarantee the control of inhabitants over the collective processes of social production of habitat? Which are the mechanisms or actions that can help to face those challenges? We asked them to give us some examples. Let's start then by hearing for 5 minutes only, and we thank you for being very precise on the time allotted. Let's hear Evanisa Rodriguez from Brazil. Thank you. The main challenges that we have is that this way of producing is countercultural, according to the society that we live. Social capitalism does not allow any space that will be favoring others than the dominant wealthy class. The process, the resources, the conduction, the leading is on hands of the people, then this is rejected by people. Why? Because the way that we activate ourselves is we're not talking only about housing. We are talking also about distribution of wealth. We are talking about the concentration of wealth and the way that we need to respect the workers. So there's a rejection from capitalists to this way of producing the city. We know that in our countries, and this is very clear here in Brazil, we are really used in having public resources. Private investments go to the concentration of wealth. So the resources for housing, for improvements, or production of whatever will always go to the private companies as services or goods. So those sectors are well organized to prevent processes that will be much more distributive, if you like. And that is where we start talking about a very interesting topic. Housing cannot be a merchandise. And if housing cannot be a merchandise, nobody could be having earnings from the production of housing. And the example that we state here is the housing programs. If we can have access to public investment, most of the part of those resources, of around 80%, will go directly to private companies, the traditional way that the governments have organized to refer and transfer resources that are everybody's resources for the benefit of a private company. So what can we do to face and tackle all of that? A lot of mobilization, a lot of pressure on the social side. We cannot change because it has not changed in 500 years, and it's not going to change overnight just because. So we need to pressure to provoke a change. That is, the organization from the grassroots is very important. And that's what we do. We do collaboration, partnerships at a national level with many groups. We have 8 national movements that do a lot of actions. We have articulation spaces at a regional, international level as well, because this gives a strength to our movements, to our proposal. And this type of exchanges will enable us to have more opportunities open up. And then we have another important thing. These ways of doing break down into 2 absurd problems in the society. Machismo is one of them. In those proposals, in addition of the inequalities that we have been speaking about, we have women. It is women that are the grassroots of our movement. It is women that are controlling things because they work differently, they make decisions differently, and that is a shock in the construction of civil society. When you come to see construction work and you see a woman, you will never imagine it is her making the decision. They always expect a man to come in and he is the supervisor, he's a decision maker. And then in racism, that is another. In the Black people, men and women in our country, we have always given the subaltern place that we need to organize by people. That means that all kinds of people will be the decision makers, and then we'll be approaching, bringing closer that the decision-making process for all of them. During the struggles, this is difficult to do. These are long roads to travel, but we see the people that are fighting for that purpose being criminalized, because normally the distribution of wealth goes to the wealthiest and to the private companies. So we need to create other kind of movements in order to change the process that will be completely different from the ones that they have imposed on us today on housing. Thank you. That's all. Thank you so much, Evanisa. And now we will be asking Ana Gonzalez from Mexico to answer this question on the challenges. Of course, I believe that taking the last part of Evanisa is the organization of movements of people that are doing social production with the state. We have to have that relationship in Mexico at a country level. There is a condition where the state wants to have direct dialogue with the people, with the person, with the individual, as to put it. They have different needs in order to improve their life, and the state wants to have subsidies and scholarships that are support that are provided to those individuals. And that is good because there's a space for the young people, from the elderly, that are at the last part of their life, that they will have care, they will have scholarships to keep on studying for mothers as well. But on housing, the way in which we are working right now is that we identify through people that are on the territories the list of people that do not have a decent housing, either by disaster or because there is a difficulty in their territories, and they enroll in a roster. So this is very different relationship that we have. We used to have, now we have a direct dialogue with groups, with public programs where financing was done to organized people. Now that does not longer exist, and now the benefit goes directly to the individual. So we had to turn things around. And this happened because there's a speech. The president states that there have been bad practices in the use of resources, but not also from our social organizations, but also civil and academic organizations. So he attacks everything on one strike with all organized movements. And at a public agenda level, we have changed the way we worked, and now we need to link academia and other kind of organizations. So we need to prove the organization power that people may have in order to manage financing and give good results. There are many experiences to that regard. However, they are not visible on the public agenda. That is our first challenge. And now, talking about the operation of the projects or programs on housing. When we acknowledge social production on housing, that forces the state to generate the resources, and the public servants at a high level are convinced of social production of habitat or housing. And so the programs have remained on their cyclic models in order to find social production of housing with some elements including technical assistance should be preserved. Normally, those are assigned to the families, and that the families, with the support given to them directly, will be making their own decisions. That is an important element, but it is insufficient because the public programs are according to the different territories. And if that strategy ends in that territory, then it will be moving to another territory. So we have to keep the dialogue going on. I think that we have the access to land as another challenge. Governments do not bet on citizenry engagement. They do it in certain stages, in the imagination of public spaces maybe, but very difficult. They bet for the production management of the public equipment on the hands of social organization or of the society at large. The way that we have figured out is self-management. The self-management on the hands of the communities in order to develop culture houses or everything that is related to art and culture in order to generate spaces and self-manage them. That is self-management of habitat that is really reduced or they are done at a very small scale. Thank you so much, Ana. Now we will be asking Francis Ressel from Sierra Leone to tell us about the challenges in order to guarantee the control of the population on the processes and the mechanisms or actions that can help to face those challenges.
Thank you,
Please.
everyone, again. Yes, so I will attempt, given the time limitation, I will attempt to give some challenges and also align them with certain actions or mechanisms to address that. One of the key challenges that we have here in Sierra Leone particularly is inadequate financial resources for housing and infrastructure. There are a number of actions really that has been undertaken to facilitate access to finance, microfinance and grants and low interest loans from community-driven projects. So we have established collaboration with financial institutions, NGOs and government agents to secure such funding. We have a project ongoing that talks about financial inclusion for women in informal settlements, and a number of actors that have even led to establishing MOU with mobile money operators so that there will be an increased access to financial resources, which is really a key challenge to ensuring access to finances for infrastructure development. The second one is insecure land tenure. So there is so much that, especially in informal settlements, communities experience eviction threats and so. So what we have been doing to address that is advocating for and work towards securing legal and land rights for residents. So through the Federation of Urban and Rural Poor, we are engaged in data-driven and community-led participatory advocacy work. And progressively, there is that shift from, forced eviction to quote-unquote upgrade where possible and relocate where necessary, which the government, the local government and central government are working towards that. So an evidence of that is they are already thinking to pilot declaring 2 settlements as special planning areas. So, I mean, there's now that commitment, but advocacy is very key in really ensuring that this is changed. But the advocacy has to be driven by the communities themselves before it can be able to have an impact on the thinking or perspectives of essentially government stakeholders. Another challenge is the traditional top-bottom urban planning approaches that in many cases marginalize community input. So also that requires advocacy, to actually ensure that participatory planning strategies can be adopted by various actors, be it state or non-state actors in that. So a number of initiatives that have been taken together with the Freetown City Council, for example. We are working also with the National Protected Area, in which has actually led to both government and other state actors are actually ensuring that they change the narrative from the top bottom to community-driven approaches. Another challenge is lack of basic infrastructure, such as water and sanitation facilities. What happens, most of the informal settlement that we have are out of grid. And so because the communities are faced with eviction threats or they are considered illegal, and because there are no well planned, so even accessing basic infrastructure is a challenge. So one way to address that is to collaborate with relevant authorities to secure funding for infrastructure development and implement small-scale community-led projects for immediate improvement. So, of course, a number of actions have been undertaken to address that one. Another challenge is a lack of access to information among community members. So what we have done to address that is support a lot of community-led data collection and mapping. And it will interest you to know, even with the development of our national plans, that the only way government was able to access real data on informal settlement is through our work. And so with that, we have been able to influence for them to see value in working with communities. The other one is vulnerability to climate change and environmental risk, particularly in low-lying areas, and regions which are really prone to natural. Of course, that is very common here in Freetown particularly. Most of our informal settlements, so communities that have been excluded are really faced with issues of climate change. So to address that, there should be an integrated climate resilience strategies into housing and infrastructure projects. And so I'll work with various actors and even giving, if you like, capacity building for communities to drive their own climate adaptation practices is actually helping to transform their respective communities. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Francis.
Thank you so much, Francis. And now we give the floor to Rose from South Africa, so she can talk about the challenges on the control of a population and the mechanisms and actions to face all those challenges.
Thank you again. In South Africa, we are having 3 spheres of government. We've got national government, we've got provincial government, we've got local government. And that is so confusing because you will never know who is doing what. When you try to talk to government, national government is there to draft policies and to allocate funding. And when they allocate funding to the provincial government. And then when you go to provincial government, you get the information that the implementing agents of the projects, or maybe housing projects or service delivery projects, is the local authority. So these are the 3 spheres of government. It is so confusing that ordinary people will never understand who to go to, because both the 3 spheres of government don't understand each other. And that's what is a challenge to us. And secondly, another challenge is for our people who are staying in investments, and our government wants to move them out of where they are so that they want to build, let's say, malls and other amenities that they want to have as government. And we find that when they want to evict the people, there's no alternative for those people. The other challenge is when our government says our people have been deprived the opportunity for housing, and they came up with different subsidy programs, and they built houses for these people. And then now these people, because they are not contributing anything towards getting the house, they will stay in that house. After some few years, they move out of the house because the house is too small to take care of the entire family. And they go and create another informal settlement. So it's a continuous action about the people. They are moving from the house that we are calling RDP houses and settle again in the informal settlement. So it becomes a problem to know who owns the house and who doesn't own the house. It's a problem to the government, and it is also a problem to those who deserve to have a house but can't have it because other people are using them with no reason. The other challenge is these policies that I talked about earlier. The policies that our government is coming up with, they are so beautiful, they are so encouraging. But when it comes to implementation of that policy, it doesn't happen. It's just a policy in a document, but on the ground, it is not what it is said in the document. As the Federation, we have created strong partnership with the Department of Human Settlement. We are always sitting in all their platforms when they review the policies. We give them many inputs that can show that when you put people at the center of delivery, then there will be ownership of the delivery that you are giving to them. But what happens, instead of the government working with us who have been making inputs in the policy, they will go to private sector, and the private sector should be the one building for the people. And it becomes now a problem for us, even though we can submit our proposals that we want to build houses, but when it comes to the local municipality, local authorities, they will hire private sector and making them to build for the people before they can even approve our business plan. So the issue of partnership between the people and government is so critical that we should continue to do it. For now, we have tried. There are many different women organizations in South Africa who are doing the same service delivery to different communities. We have now came together and say we want to get into the department so that they should start to listen to organized women who are doing things on the ground. It is trying to come up. We wish that it can be a regulation or it can become a law, that because our president also said in one of his speeches that in every allocation of funds for subsidies for housing, 40% should be given to organized women who are also taking part in housing delivery. So we are advocating for that so that we can get that 40% for all of us. I will stop here for now. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Rose. Muy rico todo lo que
Thank you, Rose. Everything that you say is amazing. And now we're going to ask for Monica Was to tell us from Lebanon about these challenges to guarantee control of the settlers in the process of social construction of a production of habitat. Mona, please.
Thank you. And I'm going to answer this question, and I'm going to shift a little bit my earlier focus, given the question that I saw in the chat, to talk perhaps also at a regional level. And I think one of the main impediments at the regional level for having an adequate functional social processes of housing production is the democracy deficit. So if we start from the context that all of us are following on the news, the context of historical Palestine, we see that there are very central challenges to the production of housing because that whole process is set up in the context of an unfolding system of apartheid by the recognition of many international agencies. So in that context, law is weaponized as a tool to basically prevent people from being able to produce their housing. And the sheer act of producing housing is criminalized through zoning laws, regulations that are then enforced in a way to prevent people from building a home. So in that context, if we're thinking of Gaza, the West Bank, Jerusalem, but also several other areas, we see that there is a process in which the entire access to land and the entire planning regime is set up so that it's impossible for people to produce their housing. So we're talking about a very different system. Now, that democracy deficit in other countries, like in Egypt or in Lebanon, will materialize differently in the sense that because there's a democracy deficit, we may allow people to do small temporary encroachments and stay silent so that it becomes sort of a gift that we allow them to do. And in that context, again, the political system and the lack of rights means that things like Rose is describing in terms of having a right to reclaim the right to housing become impossible. And hence the production of housing also becomes not a right, but something that can be swept under the table occasionally. So I think locating this whole process and what is possible in the context of the political context of the region is critical. I had in my earlier statement also pointed to another big challenge that I think is relevant for everyone, which is that growing space that land is occupying as a place of financial investment. This is definitely observable across the board in the Arab region. And we see basically that land has become an asset, a way for countries to attract foreign capital, And hence the price of land has risen so sharply that it's completely unaffordable to the urban majorities. And so the conditions for people to be able to invest in housing become impossible. And so does the possibility of occupying land, precisely because you are competing not only with other people that are better off, but actually with investors who are not even in the same country. In contexts like Lebanon and Egypt, where we're also seeing a financial or economic crisis and meltdown, this role for land is actually exacerbated. So rather than thinking that it's supply and demand and the cost of land will be reduced, actually what happens is wealth runs into land because it's a safer value than money. And so what happens is that the social value of land is fully displaced. And many of these countries don't have the protections that you normally see in other places, for example, taxing land vacancy, etc. So what happens is that we are witnessing consequently a reduction of the ability that people have to secure shelter, to secure adequate shelter, because the framework is, on the one hand, the ingredients are inaccessible, and on the other, the political context is very difficult. But even without repression, we also don't see a commitment to the right to housing. So the grounds for the negotiation towards the right to housing is actually quite missing across the region. And so we see occasional concessions made to low-income informal dwellers. You can add a floor in an ad hoc way, but conversely, you don't see a change in the regulations and the recognition of the entitlement to the right to housing. So what are the solutions? I mean, the perspective, the long-term vision is to have more justice. It's to dismantle apartheid. It's to actually create democracy and create a framework of rights, at least, even if it's hypothetical, but to find places in which these breaches are possible, and on the grounds of this, to be able to enact housing. And that's something we're quite committed to do at the Urban Lab in our modest context in Beirut. But I recognize that in other contexts, especially I think it's becoming glaringly obvious for everyone, as in Palestine, this is absolutely impossible. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Mona, muy interesante.
Thank you, Mona. Very interesting. Now, we would like to open the floor for some interventions. We can see that this question was answered at least by 8 participants in the classroom, that we would like to have at least 2 from different regions can tell us a little bit about what are the challenges in their zones to control the settlers. In the classroom, Varipinski answered from Canada, Eli Tobal from Kenya, Norianda Matibuena from South Africa, Tatiana Juarez from El Salvador, Varana Sala from Argentina, and some of the facilitators as Virginia Pato from Dominican Republic, someone from Jordania, Irene and Noti from Kenya. I want to know if someone wants to give us a reaction, tells us a little bit about their reflections about these challenges. Hasem is asking for the floor. Hasem, go ahead.
Thank you, Arila. Thank you for everyone for these insightful talks. I want to speak in Arabic. شكرا لمنى حول
Thanks to Mona about mentioning what is happening in Palestine and in Gaza, about the genocide, about the displacement of thousands of people away from their homes. This is a live example that reminds us of all our efforts as civil society organizations. As we are talking about the challenges, my question has to do with the challenges to Ms. Mona. I believe that most of the challenges that we face in the Middle East and in North Africa have to do with economic challenges. In Lebanon, it's a live example and clear example. Thus, how can we see the social production of habitat in the light of the economic challenges, with the challenges accessing land, challenges accessing any type of assets in the state. Can this be an obstacle, or can we look at the issue in the opposite way to say that the social production of habitat is one of the solutions to overcome the economic problems that we face in our countries? This is my question, and thank you all for all your inputs.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Hassan.
Very well. Thank you so much, Hassem. And let's make a motion of order before we continue with the debate and with different interventions from the participants. We would like to give the floor to our president, Adriana Allen, for her to, because she has to leave, not in a long time, so that she can give us some reactions, some comments about what was shared in these two first rounds. And after that, we can continue. Is that okay? Desmond, can you wait, Andres, please, also? And we can continue after Adriana. Adriana, please go ahead. Thank you so much, Anna. And I'm sorry for everyone that I have to leave to another HIC event that right now is starting in Mexico City. Now let me change to English to balance a little bit this session.
Well, the first thing is a massive thanks to Evanisa, Francis, Mona, Rose, and Anna for painting such a detailed picture. And I also want to thank all the participants, all the contributions. There were about 11 contributions answering each question, and they were extraordinarily enriching and insightful. So what I want to do in the few minutes I have, and before you plug back into the discussion, is perhaps to highlight some I would say some very strong levels of conversions. And I think that this is really important. We are very much in this cross-regional effort, trying to understand, do the qualities of what we call and we recognize as social production of habitat are the same. Not if they look exactly the same physically, materially, and so on across different contexts, but are they the same or not in terms of the principles? And I think that we are seeing a very strong answer saying yes. And in doing that, as I was taking notes as everyone was speaking, but also taking notes from the responses to the Google Classroom, I couldn't help but to notice that every single person was referring to 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of the key principles that Enrique Ortiz introduced very clearly in the first session of our co-learning space. And I just want to reflect a bit on those. Am I already done in terms of time? I took 10 minutes just to introduce. Yeah, okay. So I will be quicker then. The first one, I think, is clearly this recognition that social production of habitat is a life process and is not an object. And someone called Sean Turner, that many of us know, used to say, we need to think about housing as a verb, not as a thing. And I think that this notion is essential. You were all talking about the fact that social production of housing processes don't produce a roof, but produce much more than that. Produce a chain of added values, produced community, produce citizenship. The second key point that was very clearly highlighted across all speakers and contributions was the fact that social production of housing and of habitat clearly is a critical means to protect use value over exchange value. So this is expressed in very Marxist terms, but I think it's quite important to put it simpler, the idea to protect the notion that housing, the production of housing, which is not for profit, and all what that has as a consequence. Critically to us, the notion that actually the social production of habitat is then a critical means to protect the social function of housing and land, and of course of cities and other forms of settlements. Third, the third point that I thought that came up again and again is that communities involved in social production of habitat processes are and become increasingly through a process political agents of change. And this is very important because what many of you denounced was the fact that actually communities and those in need of a roof are typically either approached as customers or as beneficiaries. Social production of habitat says neither, yeah? People are not customers, people are not beneficiaries, people are citizens, and they are the architects of their own future. As Rose put it very clearly, nothing about us without us. And this is a cry that comes again and again through social production of habitat processes. Fourth, I think that also very important was to recognize that there is a very wide range of mechanisms, of ways in which social production of habitat might manifest itself. So we heard about some that might be more closely articulated, for instance, to the rituals that the Slum Dwellers International and the Federations of the Urban Poor adopt, which might look in principle as practices slightly different, but in principle only slightly different from those adopted in other parts of the world. The important thing is to highlight here is that that diversity and variety is extraordinarily important because it's telling us about the fourth key value of social production of habitat processes, which is the flexibility and the adaptability to different moments, to different political contexts, to different needs, to different sets of indigenous knowledges, and so on. And this is extraordinarily important. The last aspect, I think that the fifth aspect that everyone highlighted very strongly is the fact that actually social production of habitat is a means to exercise direct democracy and direct democratization, at least if we don't depart, if you wish, as Mona was explaining so clearly, from context where there is actually a very strong deficit, democratic deficit, and therefore that can paralyze quite significantly the possibility of these processes flourishing. In going to the challenges, and again, very briefly to close, I think that what I felt was that the answers you gave really give perhaps a full range of arguments that we need to put forward in our advocacy for the social production of habitat processes. So I would pay attention a lot to what has been said. I think that the first thing to notice is what Evanisa put so clearly on the table. Social production of habitat is a counter-hegemonic. It is about counter-hegemonic processes. It's about processes that are working against the commodification of housing, land, and cities, about against patriarchal systems, against colonial systems, against racist systems, and so on. And of course, that explains why it is resisted, why it is criminalized, why it faces enduring challenges. So I think that we need to be very much aware of the fact that there is not a linear process. I think that in the different contexts, people highlighted that we seem to be making some progress, and sadly we have, a period of 4 or 5 years where we have a complete paralysis because the state becomes completely adverse to the possibility of practicing these counter-hegemonic processes. Second question that was very clear, and I stop very soon, the issue of land. The issue of land is central, and again, this claiming and these multiple ways of claiming the social value of land and how you start with that process. I would say, because I have limited time now left, I think that the critical challenges as well that most of you highlighted have to do with relationship of the state. And I think that this is a critical conversation. So I thought that there were at least 3 key aspects highlighted. Clearly, the social production of habitat doesn't happen at the back of the state and on the side of the state, but very much in a dialogue, sometimes in a tense dialogue and interaction with the state, because it's trying to change public policies and the way in which the state uses its resources, distributes its resources, and so on. So there was a mention about, for instance, the problem that we face when we're talking about changing the mentality or the practices of a state that still acts as a welfarist state and sees housing and, housing, those that receive housing or housing policies as a matter of beneficiaries. There is a big tension with the state when the state adopts very strong neoliberal approaches. And we see, as again, most of the speakers were talking about how, again, public, common, our resources are diverted directly to the private sector. And of course, there is an extraordinarily tense relation in sectors, in countries, in contexts where there is a democratic deficit. I'm going to stop here because I know that we are pushed for time. Massive thanks. And again, I think that we have something really critical. We are going to the critical nodes that need to inform our collective advocacy, because even in contexts where social production of habitat is quite advanced, seems to be quite institutionalized, the setbacks often happen. And that means that the process of advocacy and of protection of social production of habitat as an alternative, as a counter-hegemonic possibility, is a vital and is an ongoing activity. Thank you so much to all.
Muchas gracias, Adriana.
Thank you, Adriana. And as we don't have much time, we would like to ask for the ones that wanted to intervene about this second part, if you can write briefly in the chat, because we don't really have a lot of time. I am so sorry, but the translation services are going to leave. So we would give the floor to Virginia, that is the facilitator of the third round. Thank you, Ana. And this is the third and last round in which we're going to see what are the advantages that the social production of habitat offers with the housing market offers. And we ask the speakers to give some examples in the same order. We can start with Evanisa. Thank you. Thank you for Adriana also, that is leaving us. And now, well, we said it before, when we have these processes, when we're building another type of territories, right? On a certain way, what we're thinking about, what we can have, the valorization of the land, or what we're having, but definitely cities to live. And when we live for earning, no, the order of the things, the order of everything is completely different. It's completely different because we're going to prioritize what is most important for the life of people, and we can plan from the perspective of the people, and to see how we create the cities, and know how not how it has been, how it should be available, and how the services should be available, and how the school, health, culture should be available in those sectors. So the view is much more complex from one side, and it's very rich, a very interesting point of view is when they make a mapping of villages, when they make mapping of villages, and they make big what is important for them, right? And they make small what is not so important. And we see what are the priorities. People are very good for that because they are honest and they exemplify this.
¿No? Es pensar que cuando producimos, aunque estamos produciendo un territorio delimitado e
Now
influencia.
that we have a limited territory, we have all the processes around it. So the periphery is classified according to the organized groups. Here, what it is being as precarity, there was nothing different from one thing to the other. We need to bring beauty. We need to bring quality. We need to bring culture for those territories that have been completely abandoned and be brought up. So not only physically, but you have to have that capability that goes beyond thinking about all these processes. This process should be an educational process. We are capable of manage public resources, manage complex projects. Why cannot we do that in a greater scale? Because we can be arguing about getting all that financing. What are you going to be doing in our place? And in addition to all those disputes, then we can identify other things that go beyond building a house. We do construct housing, but at the end, it is the community that has earned a capability that is quite developed, skilled, that could be used for other things. Recently, we have seen the importance that it has in order to face today's challenges. Yes, we have been skilled to be constructing a house, but those skills remain with the people. So we have to go and move forward to climate justice. There are groups that are being in charge of creating these greenhouses for feeding, producing food so people can have quality food and create new experiences for them. The generation of energy, the production of greenhouses in order to replant trees and reforest areas that are at risk. So we start to build up on other solutions that will bring benefit to the holistic way of life. Another thing is to have capabilities for these places, the skills for these places. So you will not need to go and look elsewhere for those kind of skills and capabilities. We can share it among us. It's not to replace what the market is, but maybe people can identify its neighbor and know that he is skilled to do something and that we can act in community. And as I was saying before, that way of producing is in a framework that we call solidarity economy. They can remain organized in order to undertake other ways of relating and of doing and producing quality of life in that same place. Thank you, Evanisa. Now we will move to hearing Ana Gonzalez. Thank you. Well, I just want to start by saying that in Mexico, since many years ago, the government does not produce housing, it facilitates the private. So starting from there, we have the tensions are on social production that is being developed by people on a daily life and we have the in real estate capital on the other side, and we know that they are facilitated to have access to land, to water, and those are facilitated for private sector. But the social sector has to fight for it or defend it or advocate for it. So that's to start with, and by saying that in Mexico City, at least, all last year, during the centennial of fight for the rental processes. It was an urban movement. We developed a seminar to recall the fight that we have undergone because there's a lot of people that are on rental. They rent a house, they can rent a room. It is a scheme that not even social production has been able to put the reflectors on it. So the young people have a great difficulty nowadays to have a decent housing, and rental is being done without public contracts. Everything goes from the agreement between the lessor and the lessee, and that we can see it in all those popular neighborhoods. Everywhere it is happening. We know how to be finding those rentals or leasing properties, and maybe they can tell you, go and look for that person. She is in charge of it. And there's an informal circuit. We know how it happens, but it is not visibilized and it is not accounted for. And it is a topic that we should be taking into consideration because there are other ways of speculation that have to do with private housing and the expectation of all those people of having a housing. And that is one of the elements. And we have been looking for viable measures so the state can offer rental housing. So we have to analyze the policies in other places, study some more elements, and see how we can adapt it to Mexico and adapt it to the popular sectors as well, or the middle class, that are the ones that are requiring this kind of housing. And those are the things that I could talk to you about. Yeah. Talking about other thing, I think that we need to highlight that the families, it's very difficult for them to have access to credit or private credit or financings, because that is related to the quality of your employment. If you have Social Security, if you have a formal employment, then you can have access to a certain kind of credits throughout the Institute of Labor, that those would not be the best credit regarding interest rates. But if the employment is not within the Social Security, it will be much more difficult to obtain a credit. So social production would be one of the answers, and I think that it has been the most effective one in our neighborhoods. It has been the instrument in order to face the lack of, we could not have access otherwise. That is what I believe. So I think that it is important to acknowledge. In addition to that, you know, people are extremely attached to the place where they live. So the people living downtown, they don't want to be sent elsewhere, or the people that has already lived in one neighborhood because of transportation, access to water, and they had their own relationships, they don't want to go elsewhere else. So that thing of belonging to that neighborhood is very important to them. My kid is at school, then I can talk to my neighbor, ask him to pick him up, and ask her to take it to my mother.
Entonces, esas cosas las resuelve la producción social y que son difíciles que teniendo otra forma de propiedad o de acceso a la vivienda, logremos concentrar nuestras relaciones en un espacio de ese tipo. Hasta ahí lo dejo.
And all those kind of relationships that make life easier for them. Now we are moving, handing it over to Francis.
Yes, thank you again. So in terms of this discussion, for me, social production of habitat actually offers several advantages, particularly in realizing the rights to adequate housing and other human rights related to habitat, particularly when you compare that to commercial production of housing by the state or private companies. So some of the advantage that I see, particularly in our context, is it really gives community empowerment and participation. When it involves active participation and empowerment of social production actually involves active participation and empowerment of communities in decision-making process. So it fosters that sense of ownership and control over their environment. I mean, compare that to a commercial way of doing things, it completely lacks that. And the other one is the advantage of social production is that it always embraces cultural sensitivity and customization. So this allows really for incorporation of social elements, and the housing designs actually are based on specific needs and preferences of the community or the household. There is an example of a project ongoing at the moment. It is actually in quote affordable housing mortgage scheme, but they have along the line have introduced a kind of, I would call, regimental regulations that are, in contrary to the social norms of the occupants. So at the moment, they're actually getting backlash with the whole scheme, because some of these regulations are actually kind of a UK-based, because the funder is a UK-based agency. So these are like really English culture that have brought in, and so the residents of that scheme are really not in agreement with that. So it's causing a lot of backlash. So, but if it's about social production, where communities, the needs of community, especially cultural needs, are actually taken into consideration, it really helps a lot. The other advantage of social production of habitat is it's always adopts incremental development, and it's always around affordability. So it allows, with that kind, it allows really residents to make gradual improvements, based on their financial capacity, compared to commercial entities, which is in most cases most of the investments time-bound and also, a high-end kind of cost. Also, social production addresses informality and also ensures inclusivity. As I mentioned before, it's always about bringing communities together to really take action to address issues of their of housing, and of course also their built environment. And so a number of activities or projects that are ongoing have actually ensured that their actions are about to address informality, and so that there is a kind of gradual influence in terms of how even policymakers, how some private sectors are beginning to understand that there is a need to actually embrace, informality in terms of even their business. Unfortunately, I always say this, that why people keep running away from especially people living in informality, because they are already placed in a poverty bracket, and most business people, they really don't want to do business with poor people, thinking that, they cannot afford, their kind of investment requirements. But that's what social production actually does. It embraces all, including informality. Also, the advantage is that there's some flexibility and adaptability. It allows for flexibility, adaptability that respond to changing circumstances, such as population growth or environmental. Well-established housing investors or high-end properties does not allow much of flexibility. If a housing unit is made for let's say a 3-member household, they stick to it. But social production is flexible and it can accommodate, whatever changing circumstances that it brings. It's also about human-centered approach. It aligns with human rights-centered approaches, emphasizes the rights to adequate housing and the dignity of individuals and communities. So it's very important. So in summary, I want to say that social production, offers advantages such as community empowerment, cultural sensitivity, affordability, inclusivity, flexibility, and a human-centered approach. So these advantages actually contribute to more sustainable, people-centered, and right-based housing solutions, especially in contexts where informal settlements and community-driven initiatives play a significant role in urban development. Thank you.
Gracias, Francis. Seguimos con Rose.
Thank you, Francis. Now we handing over to Rose. Rose, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you again. When the advantage or advantages, when communities are always together organized, things are easy to be influenced. We were able to build over 20,000 houses by ourselves as the federation in South Africa because of continuous mobilizing, continuous organizing, pulling together our own resources like savings, like collection of information, and using our information to engage with our government. The advantage on what government is doing is when they build these private properties, is when they create jobs for the jobless. But it is a disadvantage to the poor of the poorest who can't afford to rent or to buy those estates that are being built by government. There's a question that has come up to ask me and Francis about how we deal with the tenants and the landlords. Continuous mobilizing, continuous organizing, continuous engagement. I remember we achieved that in Kenya when there were a lot of landlords who were owning structures, who were owning pieces of land. But by engaging them, talking to them, explaining to them about land sharing, most of them started to understand that it's no use that they continue taking money from their tenants. And at the end of the day, their tenants don't have anything that they own. So they realize that it's important that everyone in the community has the right to ownership of a piece of land, to ownership of a house. So continuously we are using profiling, which is data collection exercise that makes us to visit these people house to house and explain to them the importance of working together and making sure that we change the way people are living and we change the way we are treating each other as the poor people. And it creates a very good positive relationship between the people and the tenants and the landlords and the structure owners. And I wanted to emphasize that that is why SDI has grown so much around the world, because of organizing people and making people understand how to engage, understand how to their resources, their knowledge, their ability to do things for themselves. Right now, we have been listening when we attend the General Assemblies, the World Urban Forums. Member states are talking about the new urban agenda. They're talking about the SDGs. And I remember in one of their gatherings, they have adopted the SDG 11 that talks about human settlement. We were proud to say, because of our participation in these international forums, we were able to influence them to talk about what we have been telling them all along, especially the SDG 11. Not forgetting that other SDGs are very important, but this one was the SDG that they were ignoring for a long time. But finally, they agreed that human settlement, it's important for the people to continue doing it. So what I wanted to explain to everyone here now is that as the federation, we are continuing to organize ourselves. I see a question that is saying, which are the experience challenges? Oh my God, politics. When we go around mobilizing, people are politicizing. The politicians especially are politicizing the process that we are driving. Politicians think that we are taking over their power. And then we have to convince them to understand that we have to join hands together, walk the same path together, so that we can get a better result on housing delivery. So that is the main challenge. And the other thing is financial challenges that we are not getting full support around it. Even though I'm saying we have built over 20,000 housing units in South Africa, but we can't replicate and grow fast because politicians think that the houses that we are building are bigger than the houses that they are building for the people. And the people are starting to criticize that they can't get better houses from the politicians. So it's a major challenge that we are having. But we are not quitting to say, let's give it up. No, we continue to mobilize and organize and educating them. We are continuing to educate these politicians that it's not that we are against what they are doing. The policies, as I said earlier, they are very good, but they are not good in implementation. They even know, government itself, that they are doing a lot of good policies, but they are very bad in implementing. That's the main challenge for us to say, how do we afford to benefit on the policies that we are also influencing? So we are saying we will continue. Our advantage is to continue to mobilize, to continue to organize, to continue to bring our resources together, to share with other stakeholders who understand the needs of the people, and to make our voices continuously heard. As the president have said, yes, nothing for us without us. We are not end users, we are not beneficiaries. We are the partners to implement delivery of services. We are the partners to make our people to be housed, to be economically viable, to understand the policies of government, to work with the government to implement their policies. So we would like to continue to join hands with everyone who is ready to work with us, listen to us. Then we can achieve more on what we wanted to achieve. I think we have done a lot in South Africa. We have influenced many federations like the Sierra Leone. We are the one who supported them to be so strong. We are there in Asia. We are there in Latin America. We are all over in Africa, and we will continue to do it until we achieve better life for all. Thank you.
Gracias, Rose. Terminamos con Mona Fawaz.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone. I
Rose.
mean, there's been so many great things that are said by colleagues that it's actually hard to say much without repeating what has already been said. So I'm fine. I mean, I was thinking I should go back to housing as a verb and definitely to talk about principles of co-production. And I think that everything has already been said in that sense. So I do not wish to repeat what was just said. What I would say is that in the Arab region, there is a need to actually import a lot of the tools, learn, adapt, extend a lot of the tools that have already been tried in other regional contexts and which have not been actually implemented in our region. I mean, if we think about even the very basic interventions that were done in the 1970s across Latin America to regularize informal settlements or upgrade services, very few Arab states actually committed to that. Morocco, most famously in the early 2000s, if memory serves me, began campaigns to regularize informal settlements and to recognize rights of dwellers. Lebanon has not done it yet, neither has Syria. So we see that definitely there is a need to do that. And I see some of the questions in the chat, and I want to speak to that yes, we need to import and strengthen cooperatives as a mechanism, and they can work in specific places. ZAI's zone of special social interest would be incredibly important to take away land from markets and insert them into cities. But these are all tools that, again, require a commitment, a public commitment to the right to housing, which is still in many places missing. So I think that as we develop our aspirations, we also should be concerned about that. The one thing that also, I mean, I think I should say as a bit of a warning, is that we also should not think that these forms of housing, the social production of housing, reliance on informal networks, will guarantee a more just city. What we've seen in Lebanon is, and in several other contexts that I'm familiar with, is that for you to be able to, in the city, produce your own housing, you need very solid political backing. And so what this has done is often, as Rose pointed out, placed people in the back of political actors who are willing to defend them. And it can end up in regions prone to war. It can end up in more social divisiveness, more problems, not necessarily less social cohesion. So I think we should be, and also the reproduction of some of the social inequalities along gender lines, etc., that colleagues have talked about. So I'll just say that I am very inspired by some of the proposals that are being put on the table, and that I am cautious, and that I'm very keen on bringing to the region some of the experiments that are still missing, but also in adapting and extending locally relevant interventions in every city that are based on principles of co-production that should be central. And if these principles of co-production in some places necessitate more interventions from market actors, so be it. But the important thing is to definitely involve people and get to a point where cities and housing authorities recognize the right to housing as a central principle on the basis of which we can then fight for the other principles. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Mona, y muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Mona, and I thank you all, our attendees and our guests in this roundtable, because it has been great hearing the different interventions. And we want to remind you, because we don't have more time left, this has been a new way, having this roundtable, of really putting the table the experiences of each country, of each region around the world. And the next sessions, we will be able to see the legal framework and develop this voice. That is one of our objectives, and to create more participation for all of our attendees to the sessions. So now I hand it over to Areli so she can do the closing. Thank you so much, Virginia. First of all, I need to say that we thank so much to Evanisa, Ana Paula, Francis, Rose, and Mona for the time they have devoted to sharing their experiences, their knowledge on these great topics that we have covered today. The qualities of social production of habitat, challenges and advantages as well of all these processes. And I say not only the time they devoted today, but the time that they invested before today, because each one of them dedicated their time with a lot of generosity to prepare this section based on these 3 questions that we covered today, that gave us the tone of our conversation. We would have liked that in the small spaces that we had, we could have encouraged you to participate more, but we didn't have enough time. We apologize for it, but in the chat, we have shared the document that integrates all the valuable contributions that we have obtained in the classroom. You will find it in 4 different languages, and Google Classroom will not be closed. If somebody else will want to come back again to the Google Classroom and answer the questions that we heard today, you can be you are more than welcome to do so. And then if you go to the Google Classroom, you will find the topics for our next sessions. National and international policies that are favorable for habitat, social production of habitats. We will be talking about public policy regulations that you know about in your area or in your country that are favorable for social production of habitat. And if they do not exist, has this been hindering the social production of habitat? We want to hear from you, and we will be talking about global agendas as well, where we have achieved advocacy on social production of habitat. And we will be asking you if that is useful for your local work or your work at a national level. You will be hearing, will be receiving an email with the link so you can evaluate the session. And I want to thank you once again for joining us today. We are ending at 11 o'clock sharp, Mexico City time, 1900 hours, South Africa. Thank you so much. Good evening. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you next Thursday at the same time in the same place. Thank you, Rose, Evanisa, Mona, Anna, and thank you to Virginia and Anna for their wonderful moderation today. Thank you all.
Are we taking a picture?
And we thank our interpreters. Now you can withdraw from the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
To the interpreters.
Thank you so
much,
much, everyone.
done.
Thank you, Mona. And Rose.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hi. Hi, Dr. Iffy. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Muchas gracias.